We have all the technology, smart now.
I feel like I'm on The Bachelor now. I feel like I'm on The Bachelor now.
It's not a lot.
So this, click right.
Okay.
Next. You should be good. Holly, do you want the mouse and the keyboard in case anyone types? Do you want the mouse and the keyboard in case anyone, there's no one online anymore, Monica. In case someone types something.
Oh, and then what do I have to do? Type it back?
Just see the speech bubble. It'll turn orange if someone types something.
But why do I
Just
need
click
the
on it.
keyboard?
Type back if needed.
Oh, okay, sure.
If needed. But
So it'll go orange if
Yeah.
somebody's chatting?
And don't screw up, Molly.
Yeah, I know, I'm under pressure now.
Now I feel under pressure. There's only 2 people here. All right,
I
well,
would say, but I have a meeting at 2:30.
yeah.
That's what they always say.
Holly, it's like you get your own personal presentation here.
Bring it on.
Paul's pretty much seen everything already, but welcome everyone. This is our introduction to commercial. Come on in. Oh, perfect. Angela's here. All right, and I've got 3 sitting in here. So first of all, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Allie Thibodeau. Paul and I work together in the KW commercial sector, just on Young Tower. We work with Tom, Phil, and Brian. So this is just a little introduction about who we are. So Tom has I should have updated that. I think that's about 30 years now of commercial brokerage, and he specializes mostly in investment sales and commercial sales. Phil has about 9 years of commercial brokerage. Mostly he's doing any industrial properties in Burnside, land and building in Burnside. Myself, I've got about 2 years of commercial brokerage, so I'm still quite a newbie. I specialize in office and retail leasing, so it's mostly office, but a little bit of retail thrown in. Then we've got Brian Woods. He's got 30 years of business and real estate experience in the industry. He's specialties in investment, commercial sales, and leasing. So Brian, I don't know if anyone knows, but used to own Pretzel Maker. And kind of ran with that chain for a little while. And then we've got Paul Petapa, who is sitting in the back. He's a lawyer by trade. He was the president of the Nova Scotia Home Builders Association. And his specialties are investment, commercial sales, and leasing. So what we do office, we do industrial, we do retail, and we do investment. So some of our core services is that we do landlord and vendor representation. We also do tenant buyer representation, and we do investment, property disposition, and acquisition. So we've kind of got a full range of things that we do. Yeah, absolutely.
What is investment, property disposition, and acquisition? What's the difference between, leasing an office space, for example, or retail? Like what investment property? The photo that I saw looks like an apartment building or something.
Yeah, so investment can be like multi-residential properties. So it could be like an apartment building. So Tom has a vast knowledge of buyers and sellers in the industry. So anybody who's looking to buy a multi-residential property, or it could just be, perhaps an office building or any type of property that people are looking to buy or sell. So that would be involved in the investment. So office leasing is different, where it's just the space inside. So I would either have a tenant that is looking for their own office space, and I would bring them to a particular space and lease them that space, or I would have a landlord that has a vacant office space that they want leased, and I would help to bring a tenant into that spot. Yeah. So office leasing is more the individual spaces, whereas investment is for the buildings as a whole. Yeah. So then we've got market for sale and lease, office buildings, retail shopping centers and plazas, industrial buildings, and development lands. So that's both commercial and multifamily. And then development pre-leasing and project leasing and lease renewal consulting. So any types of tenants that have their lease that is ending, that is looking to see maybe what they can get from a landlord, either in new rent or in new renovations, we can help with that as well.
What would pre-leasing be?
Development pre-leasing. So if a building is being built somewhere, and they would like to kind of fill the building before they've
So you
even.
like pre-sales and condos sort of thing?
Exactly, yeah. So we can find tenants and then help a developer kind of build for that tenant and then find tenants to fill up the plaza before it's even been built.
Okay.
Represent businesses looking to lease space. So source options for lease, office, retail, and industrial. We can work to negotiate the best terms of an offer to lease.
Sorry.
That's okay. We can assist in pricing leasehold. So when people want to get work done to their space, they might not know how much it costs, so we can help with those costs as well. And formal lease document negotiations. So we've got two types of documents. We've got an offer to lease that goes in before, where it kind of talks about the important parts that are important to both the tenant and the landlord. And then there's the full-on lease that has a lot of clauses, that would be a little bit more specific to the deal and specific to all types of different situations, so we can help negotiating in both of those. And then we also represent buyers looking to acquire a building for their business. So we often source options for sale. Like I said, Tom's got a vast knowledge of who sellers are. So even when properties are not on the market, he might be aware of buildings that could be sold. Negotiate best terms for an agreement of purchase and sale, assist through the due diligence process, and finalize any closing documents. Now, how do I get this to keep going? Okay.
Always our go-to.
All right, any questions at this point over what we do? Am I going too fast for anyone?
You're doing well.
Thank you.
You're explaining.
I also want to apologize because I'm feeling very under the weather today. So it's okay that you guys are sitting further back. Sweet.
So Holly did.
So if you click on the go-to meeting thing, then that won't work anymore until you click on the presentation.
Okay.
Oh. Sorry,
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that.
Okay.
You're right, you should have.
So now we know that for next time.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I want to apologize to the people who are not here because they might hear me sneezing and coughing and just get interrupted through that. So here is a little bit more investment property disposition and acquisition. So we represent the following groups in buying and selling income-generating investment properties. So private investors and developers, financial institutions, REITs. REITs are real estate investment trust, income trusts, institutions, and real estate companies. So types of investment properties, like before we mentioned, multi-residential apartment portfolios. So ideally, we would like to look at a minimum of 12 units. That's kind of the ideal situation that we would like to have. So anything less than 12 units might be, someone else can be referred. Office towers, retail plazas, multi-tenant industrial properties. So that could be anything in Burnside that has more than one tenant, possibly a couple office tenants in the building. And then commercial development sites. So any pieces of land that are intended for commercial use. Okay, so now this is kind of your introduction to commercial, now that I've kind of talked about what we do. So commercial real estate is a great way to earn a living if you truly look at it as a business. So you have to look at it as a business in order to be successful, which means you can't really do it part-time. So just like residential, it's about building your brand. So you've got to be able to specialize a little bit. Like I focus on office leasing. Tom focuses in investment. Paul also focuses in, sales and leasing. So you've got to be able to specialize yourself to build up your brand so that people know how to actually contact you. So it is purely a relationship business, and there's not a lot of people in the commercial industry. So you've really got to seek out who those buyers and sellers are, or who those landlords are, or who the property managers are, and develop relationships with them. So put aside money for real estate investment because, you know, if you can kind of have the mindset of a buyer, then that can also make you a better commercial agent for your buyers because you know the types of questions that they would be asking themselves and you know ways that you'd be able to help them a little bit more. And also, I don't know if you guys, I don't think you were at family reunion, but Gary Keller mentioned that the biggest thing that we should be investing in is something that we're already in, which is real estate. Yeah. That seems to be one of the most, I don't want to say stable, but one of the most profitable types of investment that you can be in. And we have access to all types of real estate at our fingertips because that's what we do. So definitely put aside some money for real estate investment. So another thing is language. So just like residential real estate, commercial real estate has its own language. So what is CAM? Does anyone know what CAM is? CAM is common area maintenance. So that's a portion of the rent that is non-negotiable. Does anyone know how we classify buildings? Are we getting any types of? So we typically classify buildings in A, B, and C classes, which is based on the age of the building, or it's based on, you know, types of maintenance systems and all different types of like HVAC, ventilation, that sort of thing.
So would A, B, and C mean that A is like
The best,
best? Okay.
yeah. And then you can kind of go into like AAA, which is like, you know, if the building is very, very efficient. So like Purdy's Wharf, those towers are considered AAA because they're LEED Gold certified, but then they also, like their heating and cooling system. So LEED is considered to be, it's LEED, and it's a designation, and Paul can probably help me with this a little bit, but it's a designation that is based on how efficiently a building is run. Is that, yeah.
You get certain, you get,
Efficiently as in the
well,
management or?
yeah, you get, no, you get points for energy efficiency of the building, if you're near public transportation, various things, your greenhouse gas emissions are down, so it's almost like the R2000 program residentially. You've got a house up here that's built very energy efficient, and you got one down here that isn't. And so if you want your building to get this LEED designation, you can get gold, platinum, whatever.
Yeah.
You have to go through certain steps.
So the Purdy's Wharf towers are considered LEED Gold certified because their heating and cooling system is done through the seawater. So that's very efficiently run. And it's also very environmentally friendly because they're not necessarily, you know, building or sending off any emissions into the air. What they have is already there.
What about the new convention center?
The new convention center, funny enough, I was just there yesterday. I don't know exactly how the energy is run in that building, but I think they also have some high-end LEED certification because they kind of have to. You know, it's a very large building. I don't know exactly.
But it would be up there as far as.
It would be up there.
Building or something like that.
Yeah,
Well, it should be, it's brand new, right?
yeah. Also, what portion of the rent is negotiable? So we've got different portions to a rent. We've got the net rent and we've got the CAM and taxes. The net rent is the portion that is negotiable because that is net to the landlord. The CAM and taxes is something that we can't negotiate on because that's based on, you know, however utilities or however different types of maintenance that the landlord has worked out for the entire building divided by each unit. So that's how much each unit has to pay in order to put into that building. So it could be like snow removal, it could be space cleaning, it could be heat lights, it could be anything. But that portion the landlord has already worked out, so that's a non-negotiable portion. So if you want to be in commercial, you have to know the basic terms in order to be able to negotiate. And there's a little link there. It's a suitable glossary to use. So that was actually given at our family reunion presentation. I just printed it off yesterday. It's like 40 pages of all the terms you could ever need. So this is something I wasn't aware of, is that we don't call each other agents, we call each other brokers. So apparently that is a dead giveaway if you're a residential agent doing commercial, and you may call yourself an agent. So as a little story, I was sitting next to Paul when we heard this, and I had my family reunion like name tag, and then I had those ribbons, you know, those ribbons that you have, and I had KW commercial, and right above I had agent. So I peeled it off, threw it out right there. So basically, it's the first telltale sign that a commercial broker works as a residential agent versus like doing a commercial transaction. So brokers are specialists. So we're not too much generalists typically. So whenever someone asks you what type of commercial real estate you work on, everybody has either one or two titles of things that they work on as their specialty. So we don't typically say that we'll do everything. And I find that, you know, newer agents typically say that they do everything, but once you kind of become more respectable in the industry, you've typically narrowed your focus and specialized in something else. So the first step to becoming an expert is education. So it can come from various sources. So if you are a commercial agent, we've got a great thing on our KW commercial website, which is the Mike Lipsey Associate Academy certification. So MICP, which stands for a Master in Commercial Properties. So there's all kinds of outside education you can find as well. CCIM, which is, looked it up last night, kind of forget what it is. It's like something to do, Canadian commercial, I'm flubbing it up right now. There's also real estate schools, there's lots of books, there's lots of webinars and conferences, and there's also some industry organizations that you can join as well. Sometimes you also got to just learn by doing. So I didn't know anything about commercial real estate when I first started, but luckily I had mentors that were interested in mentoring me and giving me education and kind of helping me along the way. So pros and cons of commercial real estate. So some of the pros is that there's larger commissions. Typically we work business hours. So we're working anywhere Monday to Friday from, 8 to 6. Typically. I say typically, but I have to admit, I still do a lot of stuff in the evenings and weekends. Every Sunday I kind of set aside for professional development, where I've been watching lots of videos that kind of help me with information and, all kinds of stuff. And Sunday and Monday, as soon as I got home from work, I was working on this presentation. So emails come in at all times of the hours, and depending on what email it is, I'll be responding right away, or if I know it can kind of wait till the morning, then it just waits till the morning. So typically, but there's some people that never really turn it off, and I feel like I'm kind of one of those people. So we have more professional clients. So, we're dealing a little bit more with business owners, people that really have that business mindset. There's a little bit more objective decision making. So we're not necessarily getting into that emotional side too much over, paint color or chandeliers or anything like that. It's basically a little bit more about whether or not the space works and whether it can do what they want. And we've got year-round deals. So, I don't know too much about residential, but from what I can gather, it seems like your guys' deals happen pretty quickly. Relatively?
Yeah, relatively quickly, for sure.
Yeah. So I've had deals, at my old company, I was working on a deal with my ex-boss that still hadn't finished by the time that I left, and we probably started that within, I think it took about a year, and it was still going on. So there's a lot of patience in our industry. You got to not get frustrated. You got to know how to keep moving things along. Otherwise, it can sometimes just die off, but you got to just keep moving it along, and it definitely takes a lot of patience. So cons, startup time. So it can take a long time to start up in commercial real estate. So one good note that was given to us at the family reunion presentation is that you should save at least a year's salary for yourself before you get into commercial real estate. Because the way that deals take a really long time, if you're kind of starting fresh new and you're building up your own database, it can take a really long time before you actually get your first client. So it does have a bit of a steep education learning curve just because every deal is different. Every deal is different. No deals are the same, and like if a deal happens really quickly, you kind of want to go back and say, why did that happen so quickly? Because it seems like all the deals that you do, something comes up in the end. And I have to say, someone once told me that every deal dies before it actually goes through, and I feel like that is true. Every deal dies before it actually goes through. So it is a longer deal time, like I mentioned before. It can take, sometimes 9 months to a year just to complete one deal. So you've really got to build that business funnel. Competition, there's only about 30 commercial agents, 30 maybe in Halifax, I would say, that specialize in all kinds of stuff. So right now the market is slow, so there's definitely more competition for those tenants that are there. Identifying and getting in front of clients. So you've really got to know, if you were interested in investment properties, who your buyers and sellers are. You've got to learn that. You've got to be able to get in front of them. You've got to, let them know why you're the expert.
Do you do a lot of networking to do that?
A lot of networking, yeah. Usually done after hours, so after the business hours, and you might spend your evening going to a networking event. But then you've also got to kind of play it out and see, like, well, was that networking event beneficial? Was I kind of getting in front of the right people? Because sometimes if you're getting in front of the salespeople, well, they're not necessarily the decision makers. So you want to try and figure out how you're getting in front of the right people and not just wasting your time and energy doing a bunch of stuff that's not really going to get you anywhere. Also, focus and specialization, which can be frustrating. Because sometimes you want to be able to, like, we're all entrepreneurs, we're all business people. We want to be able to take whatever comes in and, run with it, because sometimes we see those dollar signs. But sometimes you've got to kind of think back and say, this isn't my specialty, I don't really know what I'm doing. I would be better sending it off to someone else who does know what they're doing and just getting that 25% referral fee, rather than trying to waste your time with something that you don't really know how to do and maybe end up getting a bad deal later on. And cost of data sources. So, it can be costly, I guess, to find out, like what your data sources are, kind of build up that database can be costly as well in both time and money. So if this is something that you want to do, then you should definitely make the commitment. So it is a full-time commitment. So it's 40 hours a week. It's not part-time. It would be difficult to be successful in commercial as a part-time or as a residential agent. It is. I have to say, 2 years being in the business, I still feel like I don't know what I'm fully talking about. I'm still learning every single day. They say that it takes about 5 years in order to actually start to know what you're talking about or talking in a more confident way. I feel like I know a little bit about what I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm a complete novice, but it takes time to get really good, and it takes at least 40 hours a week, every single week, of making that commitment and getting there. So your first commission may take several months. As I mentioned before, from day one, it could be 6 months before you make your first commission. It could be less than that. It could be more than that. So you have to be prepared for that financial impact. So it's possible to shorten by transitioning with a deal in hand. So if you've already got a commercial deal that you're dealing with, then, that commitment time or that deal time will take a little bit shorter. And as I mentioned before, it's best to save up to a year's worth of salary before beginning, because you never know what can happen. It takes time to build your database. It takes time to build your client base, because you've got to learn where your clients are and get in front of them. And it's not that easy. And many data sources are required. So it depends on your area of focus and it can be expensive. So in terms of the revenue comparison, so there's residential revenue or real estate generally has two types of transactions to generate revenue. So you're either representing buyers or sellers. In commercial real estate, we've got a little bit more of a broader spectrum. So you can either be doing retail, office, medical, industrial, multifamily. You could be representing sellers, investors, or developers. You could be representing landlords or tenants for lease. And you could also be doing some consulting. So that's why it's best to specialize, because you can't do everything and you can't always do it well. You know, like they say, jack of all trades, master of none. You've got to be that special person that specializes so that you can be the master of your domain, I guess, as cheesy as that sounds. So if you want to choose a specialty, try and think about what your areas of interest in. So you can kind of rely back on your previous employment history or, you know, personal interests or knowledge. So maybe you really like office towers and you find office tenants to be really interesting. Then maybe you would go into that office leasing portion. Or perhaps you find a passion in helping new retail businesses start up. So then you might want to go into retail leasing. Or perhaps you're really interested in investment properties, so then you might want to narrow your focus down to investment. So where do you have the best sources of contacts? So referrals, acquaintances, and current database. What's that?
Just wondering, who is paying for these? Is it landlord or the people who are looking for these, or both?
So it would be the landlord. So the way that it works is when we bring a tenant to a space, then we present it to the landlord. We're always working on the tenant's behalf, but in the end, it's the landlord that pays for our fee. So they kind of set aside a management fee where they kind of expect that a broker is going to come by with a tenant. So I guess if you didn't and the tenant just went and found the space on their own, then that money, that management fee, the landlord would just pocket that. So it's usually better for a tenant to have. No, no, tenants don't pay anything for your services, just landlords.
Well, buyers don't pay us. Right, it's on the residential side, buyers don't have to pay us, so that would be very similar to that, right?
Yeah.
Because the sellers, so it's gonna be the landlord.
I've been to Ukraine
Yeah,
the last year and both pay.
they both pay.
Oh, really?
Okay,
Both pay equally.
really? Yeah. No, here the tenant never pays.
When we use of the money for the rights.
Yeah.
It all works out the same because the landlord factors that in to the lease price. If the landlord knows he or she's going to be paying on a commission, then they've already got that factored into that $7 or $8 a square foot or $12. So you're going to pay, even if the tenant did pay, sooner or later, they'd get it back from the landlord because they'd say, I want reduced rent. So it's, again, it all comes out in the end, someone pays, and it just depends on who does it.
They not reducing rent. Yeah, I was there, I was looking for place to rent.
Yeah.
And I was, in Canada for 12 years, I didn't know that another part should pay too. And they're like, you have to pay, and they pay for their work, so the agent received two signed
really?
payments. Yeah.
Really?
For the full month.
And are you sure you were with a good agent?
Oh, I choose the best real estate agency.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I understood later that they're all doing the same.
But no, here that would never happen. No.
In Europe too, like another Western Europe, some countries doing the same, so can understand.
Yeah.
So that didn't come up in family reunion then from other countries?
No, it didn't. It was mostly just like US, Canada. Yeah. No, but that wouldn't happen here. Yeah. And if it does, then someone's doing some shady business practices. Yeah. Yeah. So another thing is to think about what's available in your market. So the concentration of property type and whether or not there's competition or lack of competition. That can also help you kind of narrow your
Would that
focus.
change from time to time?
Yes. But it's a much slower life cycle in commercial real estate than perhaps in residential. Just because the amount of buildings that come in at a certain time it's typically a much slower process.
Right.
Now, right now, there's an influx of office space coming in, so it's really much a tenant's market in the office.
Is that because of the convention center, or?
Because of the convention center, because they're also coming in with Queen's Mark, which is going to bring another 150 square feet of office space into the waterfront. That's the one they're building right on the waterfront, downtown Halifax. And
That'd be
then,
expensive.
yeah, but for those like more Class A tenants, like typical like lawyer firms or financial firms, yeah, that's typically where they
Where they wanna be.
yeah, because they want to be in that most prestigious location. Yeah.
And we know that they're taking on the money. They have to pay, right, that lawyer fee. Just
Yeah.
paying for the rent.
But-
They don't get it. What did you say?
Thank you very much.
But I mean, they can also, you know, I'm sure the landlords go to those tenants directly and probably offer them some nice incentive being there because it looks good to have a high quality tenant in their building as well. And also one last thing, what grabs you? So what do you really enjoy and how can you kind of relate that to commercial real estate? So deal options. So for office, industrial, and retail properties, an agent can represent tenants in finding and negotiating leases. So we kind of talked about this a little bit before. They can also represent landlords in marketing and leasing their properties. They can help investors, developers, or users purchase properties. And they can also help investors, developers, or users sell their properties. So there's multiple things that we can do. For multifamily properties, they can also assist investors in purchasing or selling properties. For land, then you assist investors, speculators to purchase or sell land. And you can also assist developers to purchase land for future development. And then miscellaneous properties, there's types of things, you know, like hotels, motels, self-storage, auto wash. Now, one of the gentlemen that we spoke with at Family Reunion, he really specialized in, you know, car washes. I feel like, now this is just my own personal opinion, but I feel like here in Halifax, the industry would be way too small for somebody to focus just on car washes. I don't know, Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, he was in a large market and he was almost throughout the state. So
I think he was in Denver, wasn't he? Yeah.
the critical mass here wouldn't justify it.
No. No.
How many car washes? Do you mean like?
Oh, yeah,
But
but he was also representing national groups that were coming into different areas. So I think he was probably even across a couple of states.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was making a good living at it.
Yeah. Yep. So you got to also know your industry, your market, exactly. You got to know whether or not what you really like can be feasible. Also, why should you even specialize? First of all, we owe it to our clients to be experts. We do not want to bounce from one property type to another, and we're entrusted with their investment. So they're investing a lot of money into that property. They're investing a lot of faith in you in order to find them the best deal that's possible out there. So focus allows brokers to become an expert. So we can't be an expert in all areas. As I mentioned before, you know, jack of all trades. But value comes from experience, expertise, and hard work. So it really takes a lot of time and hard work to be able to specialize. But then you become, you know, the specialist in that particular industry. And then you become known as the specialist in that particular industry. Just because you're known as a specialist doesn't mean other business won't come to you, but you want to make your name known, because if you're known as being a specialist, then people will know that you're actually good at what you do. And that's very important. So as I said, Focus can still allow for many types of transactions and clients. So you can still get sales, leasing, development, and investment deals coming your way. And then there's the 10,000 hour rule. So just think too, like if I had someone coming with me or to me that was looking for me to sell them a home, I have no idea how to sell a home. So I could either say, yeah, okay, I'll try and figure that out. One of the most important decisions of your life, I'm just going to figure it out. Or I could say, you know what, I don't know how to sell a home, but I can refer you over to this person, and she has had 20 years of experience, selling homes. Which makes me sound more professional, the first one or the second one? So I have friends that are looking to buy investment properties. I would love to be able to sell them investment properties, but I have no idea what I'm doing selling investment properties. So I told them just this past week, and I said, you know what? Tom in my office has about 30 years of experience in the industry, and he does investment properties. Why don't I refer you guys over to him? And they were like, yeah, sounds great. And then I can make, a referral fee off that. So all I had was one short little conversation, and I can make money off that.
What's the 10,000 hour rule?
So the 10,000 hour rule, have you heard of the 10,000 hour rule? So basically, Paul, do you want to say what the 10,000 hour rule?
The rule of thumb is you become an expert after doing something for 10,000 hours, whether you're Sidney Crosby shooting the puck or whether you're Tiger Woods hitting golf balls. That if you put 10,000 hours into something, you're going to come out an expert.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you should retire then and there. Because after 10,000 hours.
After 10,000 hours, you should be an expert. So if you're trying to do a little bit of everything, you're not spending that 10,000 hours to becoming an expert. So that's why you should really narrow your focus, find a specialty, and become an expert by practicing what you're doing for at least 10,000 hours. Which sounds like a lot because it is a lot, so obviously it takes many years to become an expert in something. So the transaction process. Learn and understand the basic elements of the transaction process. So we've got the sale process and the leasing process. And every transaction in commercial real estate is different. It is. But they usually include certain basic elements. So in the sale process, you're typically looking at a needs analysis and listing. You got to do a market study for your clients, pre-offer analysis, marketing of assets, letter of intent, which is a non-binding offer that you send out. Then you come back with a counter. Then you get a contract. Then broker should defer to the attorney or lawyer. This was American, which is why they said attorney. Then you've got your due diligence. Then the lender, assistance with professionals, close, follow up, any further assistance. Then you've got vendors, professionals, management, and leasing.
So the letter of intent, which is the non-binding business, so do I understand that correctly, where you actually send the offer, and then once that is agreed on, then you send a binding contract?
Yes. So I mean, I'm not necessarily the specialist in this side to it, but basically you would send out a letter of intent, which is your intent to purchase the building. So you might want to send out a few key terms or key clauses that are very important to you, and then send it out to the seller just to kind of get a feel of whether or not they're on the same page.
Okay.
So if you kind of send that out, find out, yes, like there's something we can do.
Is that where the counter comes in?
Yeah.
So that, okay.
Or maybe they say, no, we're too far apart, let's just kill the deal right here. So
Then once the counter, you guys, and it's decided, then the actual contract goes out, everybody signs it, and then it goes to the lawyer?
yeah, I mean, I assume that a lot of times it might not follow the same process. There's many different processes, but this is just kind of the general way.
And due diligence would be conditions.
Conditions, it could also, due diligence includes any environmentals. So say if it's a building on a piece of land, maybe they've got to do environmentals to see if there's any
Right,
contamination.
and that's what I mean by conditions, like in the residential part of things, we have conditions, financing, inspection, all that kind of stuff. So I know due diligence and conditions sometimes between
Yeah. Exactly. So it'd be that
Yeah.
that same thing there. Yeah. And then now on to the lease process. So this is on the tenant side. So basically, you find out their needs and then you do your site selection analysis. So they've given you everything that they want and where they want to go. Then you basically scour the market, pull it all together in a market survey, and then present it to them. Then you do your tour prep. So basically what you do from there is you sit down, they discuss which ones they'd like to go see. You set up the site tour. Then you come back and say which ones did you like, which ones didn't you. Then letters of intent. So in this case, sometimes we'll do an offer to lease. We might ask for an offer to lease if we like a certain spot. We could still do a letter of intent if we've got multiple sites that we like to make sure that it's non-binding for the client. Then we've got a contract. So once we've kind of agreed on an offer to lease, then it comes down to the contract or the lease. And then it always has to go back to the lawyers and they might discuss, any specific terms. Then we've got planning, construction, and pricing, permitting and inspections, implementation and relocation. So maybe after a couple years, they've decided their current space is too small and they need to relocate somewhere else. So typically if it's within a landlord's portfolio, it's no problem to move somewhere else because then that works out for the landlord, that they're kind of hopefully getting a larger tenant. If it's smaller, they might not be so keen. And then you attend the location opening. And this can work, in office space. This works in retail space, especially if they open up their shop for the first time. You want to give them some support and go to their opening. So lease types, there's full service or gross. There's modified gross, modified net, single net, double net, triple net, and absolute net or bond net. So there's all different kinds of leases that you can get, and they typically depend on what type of industry. So a gross lease is when the tenant makes one payment to cover everything, including utilities. So that's when we kind of get into our net rent portion and our CAM and taxes portion. And then it comes out to a gross number we call the gross lease, and then the tenant just pays that amount per square foot monthly, and then that covers everything. So that's typical for a lot of office spaces because there's not huge fluctuations in the utilities. They can typically, say from 8 to 5 or whatever time they're going to be in the office space, and they can kind of have the HVAC running for the whole building. And so the tenant just makes one payment and that's it. So modified gross is when the tenant makes payment for the lease but covers a portion of their utility costs. So this is most common in a lot of retail leases. If they're in a plaza, you don't really know what their business hours are going to be, and a landlord doesn't really want to figure that out. So a lot of times the space will be separately metered, and a tenant will just pay those utilities directly to the source provider. And that's typically like electricity or heat or water. It could be any combination of the three. So sometimes one thing is included, one thing is not. So you've got to talk to the landlord and find out what's included and what's not, and then let the tenant know as well. And that could be because maybe you have a bakery and they use a lot of electricity for a lot of their equipment. And they do overnight stuff. Or maybe you've got a spa and they've got a lot of water usage. So retail can be difficult because it's always different. So you really got to figure out the needs of your client and try and think about what they're going to need when you're going into a negotiation. And then you've got your net leases, where the landlord's operating costs are reimbursed by the tenant in addition to the rent. And the tenant will pay their rent, utilities, plus either all of the landlord's costs. These costs include their real estate taxes, common area maintenance, and insurance. So sometimes you can get into that, and I think this might be a little bit more common in industrial properties. Am I correct?
Yeah, the rule of thumb I always remember is anytime you see the word net, it means you're going to be paying more.
Yeah.
So if it's single net, double net, triple net, it just means the landlord has got a very small base, and he or she is adding all of these things on
Yeah.
to make sure their costs are covered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is done.
And like sometimes, I went into a retail spot with a tenant where the building needed a ton of work, and we talked about what was included in the rent, and basically it was a very high rent, and then the tenant had to pay some of the like real estate taxes like property taxes on top of that. That's a very uncommon situation. So you've got to know and just say, listen, you're better off going somewhere else where you don't have to pay so much. So there's a lot of landlords that might want to include a net lease where they shouldn't necessarily have a net lease. So you've got to know your market. So if that is something, if say you just don't want to get into commercial at all, another way to think is, how can we earn by referrals? So a referral is a quick call that can earn you a lot of money. So this came out in our family reunion, but KW commercial members paid out over $10 million in referrals just in 2017 alone. So obviously there's a lot of residential agents out there that are referring business to commercial and getting a good piece of the pie. So here's a typical example of a residential deal. Now, this is American. This came from the US, and I basically just took it right off the slide because I really didn't know exactly how residential works, but they've worked it out to come out to be about $138 per hour for residential agents to work on a typical home sale.
Is that reasonable, Ollie?
Yeah, I'm just looking at average home times, now 2.8% is that's the commission, right? So hours would be about 2.5, and then average time on market, average close 10 to 75 homes. That would be higher, but that's a little, that would be a little high. And approximate average listing, yeah, I would say.
Yeah?
I would say.
Okay. So basically working it out to $138 per hour. So if you look at a typical commercial deal, so I mean this is also very average. An average commercial deal is $550,000. This is debatable. Average commission is about 3%. It could go anywhere to up to 5%, but average is a pretty good number. And then so they've kind of worked it out to, if you're going to give a 20% referral fee or a 25% referral fee, basically you could earn about $3,300 to like just over $4,000 an hour for referring a deal. So there's a lot of money to be made in referrals. So first of all, why refer? I mean, if I've hopefully given you some sort of, examples that commercial deals can be very complex. If you're looking at a retail deal, they're all different. And you really only know what you're talking about once you've gotten years and years of experience. Because even when you call someone and say, I've got this, maybe they've never dealt with that before. So it's good to be able to refer to someone who specializes in retail. It can be a steep learning curve for sure. There's lack of contacts for commercial services. There can be. And lack of access to commercial listing services, which is very true. We don't have anything like realtor.ca for commercial.
Right. So how does that happen?
Basically what we do is like every company is different, but every company has their website. So every company posts all of their listings on their website. So that's one way that they get out there. A lot of the commercial companies, we send out broker updates about once a month just to let you know what's in our portfolio.
So you guys get a list of all the commercial clients in the city and that kind of stuff, right? Okay.
Not necessarily commercial clients, but all...
Sorry, that's not what I meant either. I mean owners.
Both brokerages and owners. Yep. So as long as, if you're known in the commercial industry, then you can usually get in touch with a landlord and say, put me on your mailing list for your updates. And then they'll just put you on, and they send you their monthly updates over what spaces they have available. Oh, she said there is a commercial section on MLS. I can honestly tell you that a lot of commercial brokers just don't use that. And the reason why commercial brokers don't use that is because commercial brokers don't have to be a member of NSAR. And in order to use MLS, you have to be a member of NSAR. So a lot of commercial brokers choose to not pay for those services, and that's why they don't use MLS. What's that?
They don't have a what? Database? Or
They do. There's a commercial section. But I mean, basically it comes down to costs.
But the brokerage has to be a member of NSAR, am I
Yeah.
correct? Yeah. And they choose not to, because I've had commercial agents who can sell residential,
Yeah.
want to show a listing of mine, and they don't have a lockbox or anything, so you have to take the key to them or leave it here or whatever,
Yeah.
and they don't want to pay the NSAR fee to have a lockbox.
So at my old company, we weren't members of NSAR. So I wasn't having to pay those additional fees. So I didn't necessarily have access to MLS because not a lot of commercial brokers are NSAR members. It's not worth it to become a member if like
You don't need the,
exactly.
So
Now, as a member of KW, I had to become a member of NSAR. So I have access to MLS and all that stuff now. Yeah. Oh, but just going back to your point, so we use our websites, we use our broker updates. Here at KW, we have a flyer that we send out to all the postal codes in the city about quarterly. So we, go out that way. But for the most part, a lot of the brokerages just kind of email each other broker updates or build up a database where they get the emails of clients and then send out all of their listings to clients that way. So it's still very, what's the word that I'm looking for? I was surprised that there's still not a lot of like technology, like new technology sources. Yeah, no, it's true.
It was explained to me when I took the course that everybody takes.
Yeah.
And I told them I was going into commercial, they said, oh, that's the old boys network. And it is. It comes from experience, from
Right.
people you know and whatever.
Yeah.
But the old boys don't last forever, right?
No, they don't.
And the
Seems like they do. There's a bunch of them that should retire.
But there's going to be the younger, demographic.
Not Paul.
No, not
Yeah.
Paul. But the younger demographic that's going to come up this pipeline, let's say,
Yeah.
is going to want to have technology and ways to communicate.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But like, for example, and I don't want to use the V word, but there's another database out there that the public that are looking for houses can go on and look, as in, okay, I'm going to say Viewpoint, Realtor.ca, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if you just had, say for instance, myself, I'm not an agent, I'm just a Joe Blow, and I need some office space,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where would I go to look for that?
I mean, you can always start on Kijiji, depending on the.
Okay, so you guys do put a lot of stuff on Kijiji as well?
Some companies do, some companies don't. But the best way is just to go to the company's website.
But what if you don't know the company? Like, for instance, if somebody's looking for a house on Main Street.
Just
Yeah, I
Google
guess.
commercial
Yeah.
real estate.
Yeah.
Commercial real estate Halifax.
Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of the best way. And then you just have to kind of go through. Because a lot of times the way that we're finding out about properties is still from picking up the phone. Because sometimes properties can move quickly, sometimes they don't. And sometimes people can have pocket listings. So it's a lot of like, getting to know the people in the other companies so that when you call them, they'll answer your telephone call.
Do you mean the other brokerages that
Yep.
sell commercial?
Like CBRE, Cushman
And
Wakefield.
so why would they want to share information with you?
Because I could have a tenant that could fill one of their subleases.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same reason, Holly, that other agents want to deal with you. They know it's a two-way street.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You've got a
Yeah.
property, they've got a property, so we deal with
Yeah.
other brokerages.
Right,
I mean, we're competitive,
right,
but we're not stupid.
right.
Yeah.
If I've got someone that win your building, and my commission's gonna be 20,000, and
Yeah.
your commission's gonna be 20,000, we're gonna do
For
the deal.
sure, yeah.
You want to, I mean, like I said, it's a relationship business. Yes, they're your competitors, but you also want to build a professional relationship with them.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
for other agents
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
thing, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
So you can't, it's just bad business to burn any bridges with any other agents. Yeah.
And our commercial is small enough that we know the people we don't want to deal with. The same as Holly, you know the people you don't want to deal with.
That's
Ours is even a smaller gene pool.
right.
And I have to admit, for being, old boys club, it's still very gossipy. People know everything about everyone. Like,
Oh, my
yeah, it's true. It's,
You know, I thought.
when people are leaving the industry, when people are moving brokerages, like, right away.
Yeah.
Sometimes before they've actually left, you just hear the rumblings.
Right. And that's good, that happens.
How long the course last? For like 1 week?
1 month.
Commercial.
Well, I have to take the same course you do, but I'm now doing my master's in commercial
Yes.
through that LIPSI, and it takes a year.
Oh,
I've done 8 modules so far and written 8 exams. I finished 4 more and then do my final exam. So I should have that in October, November.
Okay.
I'll just-
Let me see.
Oh,
Oh, Monica W. has left. Wait. Can you hit the presentation?
okay.
Okay, I'm almost done. I can just zip through this. Okay, so it can be a steep learning curve. You can lack access, and basically, business brokerage and E&O insurance differences. If commercial is not something that you specialize in, you could get in a lot of trouble legally if you try and do a commercial deal, and then basically, if it all blows up in your face and you end up in court, a lawyer could just ask you, simple commercial real estate terms, and that's a dead giveaway as to whether or not you're a commercial agent. Why refer? It can be very high cost to market a commercial real estate property. I don't really know how much are residential signs. No?
no, I just put the package.
Yeah.
Everything, Apple cards.
Okay. Because commercial real estate signs can sometimes be upwards of $500 just for one sign. Yeah. So it can be expensive. It's nice to
$100 for everything.
really. Another thing, it can be longer commission payoff cycles, as we've talked about before. There's those ethical legal issues. If you don't know what you're doing and you're kind of getting involved with it, like I said, I would never try to sell a house because I don't know anything about selling a house. There's a ton of stuff that that I know nothing about, like heat pumps or, I don't know. I wouldn't know what to look out for because I know nothing about buying a house.
You know what I like about commercial? It's just like always attracting me, but there's no emotion there.
Yeah. that's
There's
right.
still emotions.
Yeah.
There can still be
But
emotions.
not every time.
But what
It's
replaces
not every time.
the emotion sometimes is you're dealing with 10 or 12 people in the company who have a say on what's going to happen. So you're maybe sitting with this person, but behind that person, there's other people saying, no, we don't want to go to Burnside, or we don't want to go to Bears Lake.
Yeah.
We don't want to be on the second floor. So
Yeah. Lots of
it's sort of a quasi emotion, but it's
There's still
it's
emotions.
still emotion.
They're not, it's not any emotional attachment there.
To
So
the,
they
yeah.
don't care what color, what kind of windows, what
But
nothing.
you're right, but it's what Paul said. You take that emotion away, but there's other things that when you're thinking about dealing with, 10 people.
But
Yeah.
it's much less, I think. much less.
It
Yeah,
depends.
it's a different kind.
Like if you're starting with working with a startup company, there can be a lot of emotions because it's their first ever store.
My husband was buying those investment projects, and he was just like bringing me to the show with him up there, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so scary, like a ghost house. He's like, no, there's lots of potential. I'm like, I would never go there, like just
Yeah,
Yeah.
as a human.
yeah,
But he doesn't see that on angle at all, it's just money.
yeah.
Money
Yeah.
and see.
But that can still bring a lot of emotion.
There is an objective in, but just think about it. When we have to sit down with a person who has owned a building for 30 years, ran their business there, and then want to sell it, and they win 2 million, and we're telling them it's worth 1.4. There's a lot of emotion in the room.
I just
greediness.
I just put your.
Oh, that's okay. Here. Oh, I can still go. Can you just exit out of that?
That's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. Oh, I meant to get rid of that line. It says NAR in many states rules or guidelines. So if you go back into that giant contract that we had to sign, or at least know about when we were going through our course, I didn't get the time to actually go through, but I'm pretty sure there's a section that states that you have to have like the knowledge of what you're actually selling. Like you have to actually be able to specialize in that. I have to go back. I apologize. I meant to get that for this presentation, but I did not. But like we were talking about before, a good lawyer could easily suss out whether or not you're actually a commercial agent by asking you basic commercial questions.
Well, I don't think in NSAR, and I don't really know the answer to this, but we can't sell commercial without having something, right?
Yeah. I would also,
Technically, but some people do.
I would still talk to Anne because she said a lot of times, like, E&O insurance might not cover
Yeah,
you
Exactly.
if you try and do a commercial deal and commercial is not your specialty, and then something blows up and maybe you get sued, they might not cover you for anything like that. So I would talk to Anne about that too. Just hit, yeah. So what is a good qualified referral? So leasing, tenant rep, not tent rep. Anything like a 3 to 5 year term minimum, an established business, and anything about 1,500 square feet or higher. For sales, if they have the financing in place, if you know they're for sure a serious buyer and they're looking to buy anything, 500 grand or higher. Those are good referrals to send our way. In conclusion, if you want to do commercial, then make the commitment and specialize. There's nothing saying that you can't. Talk to Tom. What's that? Otherwise, referrals can be a great way, like a great win-win situation where you can earn some great money for yourself. So, and it goes both ways. When we were at family reunion, there was a woman that was talking about she does commercial real estate in Manhattan. And she was saying that like she deals with people in the fashion industry and they had this commercial property that she was helping them with. They also mentioned to her that they had a $15 million loft that they wanted to sell. And she said, well, I don't do residential, but I'll refer you to someone who does. And she made $100 grand just on that referral. Now, I know we're not Manhattan, but
it is easy, definitely that equation that you have there.
yeah,
That's great.
like,
You
same
have to
thing.
go through all this stuff, just call you and say, here, I've got something for you.
Yeah, exactly. And for more info, you can go to our website. And those are my references. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I think I've asked enough.
Any questions online? Anyone?
I think we lost our line for a second.
Well, Angela's still there.
Okay,
Angela's still there. And those are, if you go to the family reunion website, you can find the presentations that I took a lot of my information from.
Thanks very much.
Oh. You're welcome.
Good presentation, Ellie.
Yeah, very good.
I should turn this
Have
off.
room for the offer.
$10,000, by the way, it's
Someone's
1.1 here.
glasses there.
Yeah.
Is that yours, Ellie?
Yes.